after the story first came out, I think it was a couple days later, and he really started to try to defend himself on social media, I was texting a friend who's, in political circles, and I said, I give it hours before Bob Ferguson tweets out, you know how he's always sending out those, Dave Reichert caught on a hot mic saying this horrible thing. And it's usually not horrible. It's usually something about his religion. And Bob Ferguson apparently has an issue with people being religious. So I was like, I give it hours before he tries to distract by doing either himself leaking out some Dave Reichert audio or having his buddies at the Seattle Times leak out some Dave Reichert audio. Like clockwork, this man is so predictable. He sent out within hours of me texting a friend that, not one, but two. Dave Reichert caught again on a hot mic. And it just dumb things. It's like things that don't even matter. And so he was obviously trying to. One of them, again, was that climate thing. So Dave Reichert at events apparently keeps talking about, I was at one of these events where he said, look, we have to take care of our planet. We have to make sure that we're doing things, to take care of our state and this beautiful place that we call home. But yeah, he says, I'm religious. I do think ultimately that God controls the weather, and there are some things that are out of our control. Bob Ferguson, for some reason, thinks that's the most controversial thing in the world. And it's like, is it though? Like, do you really know that there isn't a God out there that's in control of the weather? And what is Jay Inslee doing exactly that you think will help control the weather in the future? So he keeps putting this out. He literally said, caught again. Earlier this year, Dave Reichert was caught denying the science of climate change to a mega audience, but we now know he just didn't do it once. Newly released audio reveals he did it 3 times. This is what he truly believes, quote, we can't change the weather. God's in control of the weather. Does Bob think he can change the weather?
Aren't we just trying to mitigate the
We're
impact
trying to
we have?
mitigate. Yes.
So it's not, that's not a controversial statement. I think it's whoever your God is.
Right.
Probably does control the weather.
And also that's insulting to a lot of other religions that believe in a lot of other beings, that they also don't think that we're in control of the weather. But yes, can we mitigate some of our human caused impacts on the environment? Of course we can. Not through Governor Jay Inslee's horrible climate policies that just make the middle class more poor and don't actually do anything to reduce climate emissions, as an example, but through real solutions. So I'd rather have a candidate, frankly, who said, hey, yeah, we need to take care of this beautiful state of ours, but ultimately, like, God's in control. Even though I'm not a religious person, that doesn't offend me. Like, why does it offend Bob Ferguson so much?
It seems so desperate.
Well, it is desperate,
feels
Nicole.
Very desperate. But it's so blatantly desperate.
It is. You know what else is really blatantly desperate? Using your office and the taxpayer time and dime to help your gubernatorial campaign. And this is one of those things that, again, it bothers me because it's like, this is so obvious. You're probably familiar with this, but there has to be this clear line between campaigning and, serving. So if you are an elected official and you're also campaigning, maybe for re-election or for a different position, there has to be a bright line between those two things. You can't use your position or resources as an elected official to help out your campaign. Of course, some things are hard to distinguish. Like Bob Ferguson, ramping up press conferences about how great he is and these things he's doing. He's probably doing that, right? Because he wants his face on TV more. That's free media time for him. Like, hey, I could do an interview with King 5 or the Seattle Times as the Attorney General on something great I'm doing, and that just happens to help me get some recognition in my race for governor. Well, this one is even beyond that. And honestly, I think it should be a PDC violation. I know it's hard to prove that the intent here is to help his campaign, but for the love of God. So they sent out this massive press release through the Attorney General's office yesterday. The headline, Attorney General's lawsuits result in more than $2.6 billion for Washington in the last decade. Interesting. So you've chosen right now, in the middle of his campaign for governor, to talk about all the work he's done in the last 10 years. Couldn't save that for, I don't know, maybe his last few days in office as Attorney General, and then look back at the last decade plus and say, hey, here's all the cases where he's brought in all of this money and recovered money on behalf of Washingtonians. He says about $780 million have been consumer relief, $1.8 billion money invested to increase services. So this is like, and they also put out an email, again, from the Office of Attorney General, where they reiterated these points and saying he's also won $50.4 million for Washington during the first half of 2024. He said, quote, "My office takes on powerful special interests that refuse to play by the rules and puts money back in the pockets of Washingtonians." In what universe does that not sound and read like a political ad? I'd also note, what's very absent from those releases? Any mention of all the money he's lost. Like, did you see Value Village on there anywhere? Let me just get my...
all the cops' lives he's destroyed.
Yeah, anything about the lost lawsuits? Nope, don't see it. Wow, isn't that convenient? Anything about... Let me just get my binoculars back on. Anything about the chicken checks? No, not about sending money to people who've been dead for 40 years? Nope. It just couldn't mention that.
Whoops.
Is there a more blatant... just that quote coming from his attorney general's website. "My office takes on powerful special interests that refuse to play by the rules and puts money back in the pockets of Washingtonians." That is truly as campaigny a campaign thing as I've ever seen. So what do you do about something like that, right? I don't know if there's anything to be done, because it's not as blatant as saying like, hey, I, had my executive assistant work on a campaign flyer on our computer and then send out a campaign mailer like from work. Or using a press conference that's a press conference he's holding as the sitting attorney general to talk about his campaign or to do an interview like that. Those things are pretty cut and dry. This is like, nothing saying I can't tout my own success, toot toot, using the attorney general's office and the taxpayer money and the taxpayer time. And if it just happens to benefit my gubernatorial campaign, well, then so be it.